Hey, what's up? So, I had a thought. And the thought was that I wish I had something to do, somewhere to go, where I would be wanting to take videos or photos and something that was going to be interesting. And I find this is always a huge problem. I find myself always just sitting down on the couch, playing video games, spending however long on my phone, wishing that I had something to take videos of or photos of, and it's a huge creative block. I find always needing something that I think is really interesting or fun or going on a trip is actually a huge problem. And it's a problem that I've had ever since I started doing photography. And I don't know if it's so much about shooting what I want to shoot versus shooting things that I think are interesting for other people. And so that's why I decided to make this video. So, because I never have anything to take videos of, unless I'm going on a trip or I'm going somewhere, why not take that video of something that would otherwise be considered boring? Why not do a project where, instead of waiting for an opportunity to come up where it's something super interesting, why don't I just turn a relatively boring subject into something that's a lot more interesting? That sounds like a lot more fun and challenging than showing up at the Grand Canyon and pointing a picture at something that is always going to be breathtaking. I think it's a huge challenge to turn things that are pretty boring into something that can elicit some sort of emotion. And that's really the magic of cinematography or videography or whatever you want to say. Cinematography is pretty overused. What I find so intriguing is when people are really good at regular everyday things and it's something that make you stop and have a second look at it, or from a perspective that you haven't seen it before. I want to make something that's every day a little bit more interesting. And so I think anyone can do this. I think anyone wants to practice their photography or videography. Instead of waiting for an important moment to come up or waiting for a trip and scrambling with your settings and trial and error, and you come back home and you realize that because you don't practice, a lot of your videos suck. The quality's not there, or you messed up the filter or the settings. So make those mistakes in places where you can fix them, in places where you can put in the reps. So I had this idea a couple days ago that I wanted to make a cinematic drone shot or cinematic video of my town I live in. So I think I'm going to do that today. The problem is I only really have like an hour and a half. The drone is all good to go. Everything's charged up. I have my filters. So one thing that I've made the mistake so many times, and I was about to make the mistake before I even had this thought, I don't even have the SD card put in the drone. You know how many times I've left the house and gotten to somewhere, gone on a hike, gotten ready for a hike, and then I get there and I go to take the drone out and I have no SD card. If you go through the reps of getting your gear ready and then getting out there and test shooting, then it's going to be that much easier to not have to think about any of that when it really matters. So always make sure your SD card's in your drone before you leave your house. I'd have been so mad if I'd have got to the first location and didn't have that. Let's just go take some drone shots and stop talking about it. Let's get to the first place. Alright, hopefully I don't crash this thing. I'm gonna fly it from the truck. I don't usually fly from the truck. I usually try to get out and go, but because I'm trying to hit 2 locations at once here, instead of moving the truck, getting out, and then trying it, and then moving truck again, I think I can get both shots. I'm wondering, can I record the screen? SD card. See? SD cards. I don't have another SD card. I should buy one. Okay, so sorry I can't record a screen, but my settings are basically gonna be 1/50, 4K, 30 frames per second. I'm shooting this whole thing in 30, even though I like to shoot in 24. I started this whole thing shooting in 30, so I'm gonna continue shooting in. Also, side note before I fly here, while I'm thinking about it, I seen this on another YouTube channel, and I'll try to find his name and I'll throw it up here on the screen, but I learned something from him that I never thought of before. It's basically, if you operate in a 24 timeline, like a 24 frames per second timeline, if you take any 30 frames per second footage and throw it in a 24 frame timeline and then slow it down to 80%, it makes everything look really nice. It's not slow-mo and it's not standard speed. It's kind of like daydreamy, I guess. I don't know how to really explain it, but after seeing him do that, I've been using it in some Instagram stuff, and I actually really like it. It kind of makes movements look a little bit more, I don't know, there's a weird cadence to it. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit better, and it's also easier because if your camera crops in to get 4K at 60, it's a workaround for this. I have the Lumix S5 II. Now, it's not a huge big deal, but this allows you to kind of use your 4K 30 footage and still slow it down. You can't slow it down to any more than 80% or it gets a little bit choppy, but either way, I find it's a really cool way to make things look a little bit interesting. Let's get this thing up in the air and see what we can do here. The second time, I'm gonna fly out of the side of the truck. Okay, once again, power lines are my biggest enemy. Another thing that I take, because I only have one battery for both my devices, I always carry a rechargeable battery pack. It's a pretty windy day out today. The drone's definitely fighting. I am shooting this on the Mini 3 Pro. I'm not gonna buy the Mini 4 as of right now. Okay, just like I mentioned, make sure you have all your stuff before you leave the house. Of course, I mean, I don't have my neutral density filter for my camera, so if I try to take any camera shots right now in this midday sun, I'm not going to be able to use the proper aperture. So this is what I mean about learning from your mistakes. I left it on the counter. Another thing that I thought of while I was driving to this next location is that I'm guilty of this as well, but making sure all your drone shots have some sort of direction that's fluid. This is significantly important in any video, but especially in drone photography, I find, because not only are you trying to tell a story and get a nice looking cinematic shot, but you're also trying to have a finish and an end to your entire video. And so each shot should kind of be linear in that sense. It should just kind of be seamlessly, I mean, of course, I think everyone knows this, but it's something that you can easily forget when your drone's in the air and you're thinking about wind, you're thinking about weather, you're thinking about the exposure, you're thinking about hitting the record button, because I've forgotten to do that before. And so the number one thing to try to remember, and I don't even know if I even thought about it while I had the drone up in the last 4 locations, but it's really good to remember what you're panning in what direction so that you give yourself a fluidity in your actual final cut. And the best way to kind of get around this without having to think about it is always do every direction. Whatever movement you want your final cut to have, at least give yourself options, right? You don't want to be kind of stuck. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of this. It's something that I struggle to remember when I'm up there, mostly because I'm always fighting battery power and I'm always trying to do things quickly. It's always rushed, and especially when you're on a trip. When you're on a trip and you got at one point to another, if you got a kid with you, the drone is really rushed. You don't have a lot of time. So taking 14 shots of one thing isn't always something you can do, right? But just try to think about the last shot you took. Think about what directions that shot looked best in, and maybe continue that direction for the next shot, so that at least you have something to work with. This is going to be the last shot for the day. I think I have enough to make somewhat of a cinematic video. When it comes to when you're doing like drone stuff or even any photography or videography, you should have a plan. I'm guilty of never having a plan in terms of the shot list. So plan out your shot beforehand. Make sure you're getting all the shots you want and you can tell the story you want to tell, because ultimately that's the whole point, right? Telling the story. Hey guys, what's up? I'm back in my basement. I threw the clip into CapCut and immediately started kind of trimming it up. I started looking for, the direction of these clips, rearranging them to make sure it's as linear as it can be. I think the video turned out pretty good. I think that I got the essence of the town. If you want to get good at doing your stuff, if you want to do it to be able to sell it or post it somewhere, I think having expectations or having rules or some sort of client expectations, however you want to put it, I think having that's really powerful. I think it helps kind of guide what you're doing. Yeah, I think all together the mini project worked out great. I think it all went kind of well. Why do I think this is important? I think it's important to practice. I think it's important that I need to practice. I need to practice in terms of, what I'm going to make, having direction, planning, shot planning, making things a little more structured, so that way when you are somewhere where, you really want to get that shot and you're not going to be going back there probably ever again, the last thing you want to do is make mistakes, right? You want to be good at the basics. You want to know the fundamentals are on lock. A big problem I have recently is I don't want to go out, or I don't have motivation to go out to create things because, there's nothing to create, it's boring, what am I going to take photos of, what am I going to take videos of? So I think that anyone who's getting into photography, videography, and droning, I think it's really important that you get out and practice. It might, even if you don't ever post it anywhere, at least get out and pretend you're making a video for a client, or pretend you're making a video showcasing where you've been on a trip. And when you are doing those things, it's going to be a lot easier to make sure that everything's fundamentally right. And I mean, I made fundamental mistakes here still. I mean, altogether, I think I pulled together an okay clip. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is at a paid level. I don't know if, but ultimately, you're never going to get to that level unless you put in the reps and make mistakes, right? So yeah, I mean, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for checking this out. The next one, and let's create something. Let's keep evolving. Let's keep doing it. We gotta keep getting better. Catch you guys later.